So welcome everyone again to our Climate Smart Communities and Water webinar series. This is part of the Hudson River Watershed Alliance's monthly breakfast webinar series. My name is Emily Vail. I'm the Executive Director of the Hudson River Watershed Alliance. The Hudson River Watershed Alliance is a regional nonprofit. We work to unite and empower communities to protect our shared waters. We do that by supporting watershed groups, improving coordination across municipalities, and communicating as a collective voice across the region. Watersheds are really important in thinking about climate change impacts, particularly ones that relate to water. Watersheds are really significant in understanding flooding dynamics, drought, erosion conditions, along with water quality, including issues like harmful algal blooms or sewage contamination due to overflows. And the Climate Smart Communities program is offered by New York State to help local governments take action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and adapt to a changing climate. The Climate Smart Communities programs offers grants and free technical assistance to support municipalities through this process. And just a quick overview of Climate Smart Communities. Registered communities are ones that pass the Climate Smart Communities Pledge, and certified communities are those that complete and document actions that mitigate and adapt to climate change at the local level. And having the Climate Smart Communities certification can increase points for municipalities on some grant applications. Each action in the Climate Smart Communities certification program comes with a certain number of points that lead to thresholds for bronze, silver, and gold certification. 2 of the actions are required, 13 are priority, and there's over 100 more possible actions on a wide range of topics, and many of those are related to water and watershed work. The actions for certification are organized by 7 pledge elements, which you'll hear us refer to. And in particular, I wanted to highlight the land use policies in pledge element 6 and enhancing community resilience in pledge element 7 as particularly having an overlap with water and watershed work. And I should add pledge element 9 around community engagement as well. So we've been offering this webinar series, and I want to thank the Hudson Valley Regional Council for helping out with this series. Thanks to the Hudson River Estuary Program at NUIPIC for funding this work. Today's webinar is on the Hudson Valley Flood Resilience Network, which is an opportunity for regional collaboration on climate smart communities actions. We'll also talk about some overlap with state federal programs along with water quality initiatives. So really we want to share how working on climate smart communities can achieve multiple goals. And we know that municipalities are working really hard on everything that you do, and hopefully try to find some synergies to make these certification points easier. So we have a couple of past webinars on our YouTube channel. We had Cornell Cooperative Extension present on actions related to water, and we had Hudson Valley Regional Council and the Capital District Regional Planning Commission present on technical assistance opportunities. So if you missed either of those are available on our YouTube channel on a playlist related specifically to this series. So with that, I'm going to transition into our presentation, which I'll be giving, but just to say in terms of our housekeeping here, if you have any questions during the talk, we'll be taking those at the end. Please use the Q&A box, and we'll be moderating that discussion after the presentation. Okay. So with that, I'm going to switch gears into our feature presentation on the Hudson Valley Flood Resilience Network. And I'm joined here by Jessica Kuonen from New York Sea Grant. We'll be co-presenting this. So today we'll talk about an introduction to the Hudson Valley Flood Resilience Network, who can join, leadership, programming offered through the network, connections to climate smart communities, and how you can get involved. So in terms of who we are and how the Flood Resilience Network is set up, we'll be talking more about this, but just by way of an introduction, myself and Jess are the Flood Resilience Network co-facilitators along with our colleague Bennett Brooks at the Consensus Building Institute. We provide staff time, fiscal sponsorship for the network, and run the operations and administration of the network day to day. So again, my name is Emily Vail. I'm the Executive Director of the Hudson River Watershed Alliance. We are a regional nonprofit that works to unite and empower communities to protect our shared waters. Jessica Kuonen is the Hudson Estuary Specialist at New York Sea Grant. That is a state university-based program that brings science to the shore through high-quality research, outreach, and extension. And I think having each of our organizations and our respective strengths really help build the network, and it's been great to partner on this program. So why is a flood resilience network important for the Hudson Valley? We know that flooding is increasing in both frequency and intensity across the region. We've seen extreme rain and massive storms that impact flood conditions throughout the Hudson River watershed. So thinking about riverine flooding, stormwater flooding, all of those different types of flooding. And then along the Hudson River, we have rising sea level, high tide flooding, and storm surge that contribute to flood conditions similar to what we saw last December along the Hudson River waterfront. So we have all of these different types of flood exposure in the region, both along the Hudson River and along its tributaries into the watershed. The Flood Resilience Network focuses on the role of municipalities, in particular, in flood mitigation and adaptation, because municipalities have the primary responsibility for local flood resilience planning in New York State, given home rule and all of the other circumstances in our state. So we know that many communities have limited capacity, funding, and support to advance this critical work. And so there was power in bringing everyone together to work more collaboratively. So the Flood Resilience Network helps municipal governments access resources and navigate complex processes for planning and implementation of flood projects. It provides a platform for peer learning and support. And we offer programs including tours of flood resilience projects, in-person meetings for peer learning, and webinars to share information, which Jess will be presenting more about later. Our programs are really based on the priorities of our municipal members. They're really centered in the network, and we have a lot of different feedback mechanisms where we will look to our members for a better understanding of what they're currently working on, where the barriers are, and where the Flood Resilience Network can help support, either directly or indirectly by connecting to other resources or partners. So in terms of the history of the network originally started as a sea level rise peer learning group. So after historic flooding in 2011 and 2012 from Hurricane Irene, Tropical Storm Lee, and Superstorm Sandy, the Village of Catskills, City of Kingston, and Village of Piermont went through extensive sea level rise planning processes to assess their waterfront vulnerability, and they created action plans. And these three municipalities started to meet, and they found real value in gathering and comparing strategies. There were a lot of similarities, there were some differences, and they formed this learning group and met regularly to discuss. In 2018, they established the Hudson River Flood Resilience Network for municipalities to work together on flood resilience in a supportive environment. And this was specifically for the municipalities along the Hudson River who were working on coastal flooding, sea level rise, and storm surge issues. So I want to recognize the effort of so many partners over the years to create, build, grow the Flood Resilience Network, including the Hudson River Estuary Program, Scenic Hudson, the Consensus Building Institute, New York Sea Grant, Hudson River Watershed Alliance, and the New York State Water Resources Institute. So this has taken a lot of different staff, volunteers, leadership to build from the learning group into the Hudson River Flood Resilience Network, and now into, starting in 2023, the Hudson Valley Flood Resilience Network. So in 2022 and 2023, we hired River Network to develop a strategic roadmap for the Flood Resilience Network. River Network is a national nonprofit that works on capacity building, community resilience, environmental justice, and other issues. And the Flood Resilience Network had hit a moment where we needed to really establish ourselves to grow in a more sustainable way. And so the goal of this process was to really understand the needs and goals of our members, to define an effective organizational structure, and develop more concrete ideas for programming that would be impactful for our members. So we developed this roadmap through a really in-depth stakeholder engagement process. We got feedback from our FRI members through discussions at in-person meetings. We held a facilitated workshop in Kingston with a very large room of members and partners. This was part of our annual watershed conference last year. We had focus groups with founders and municipalities that were new to the Flood Resilience Network to better understand their perspectives. And we also had peer learning opportunities with other flood networks, including the American Flood Coalition and the Resilient Mystic Collaborative, to have a better understanding of how across the country other flood networks are operating and how they support their communities locally as well. So with our new strategic roadmap, we have defined the mission for the Flood Resilience Network, and that is to connect local governments who are committed to taking actionable steps to manage current and future flood risk. We do this through convening communities on projects and strategies, coordinating local and regional efforts, sharing opportunities for funding and training, facilitating communication between local governments and regional partners, communicating on challenges and barriers as a unified voice across the region, and catalyzing flood adaptation actions. Couple text heavy slides, but I think this is really significant to understanding what the network is about. We also established the values and community agreements for participation in the network. So as a community, we've agreed to share resources, stories, and data intentionally and meaningfully, to embrace and celebrate diverse perspectives, people, and experiences, to listen to understand and share the mic, to center our work around shared goals and vision, gather with a collaborative spirit, communicate with honesty, transparency, and positive intent, and to value and elevate all of the knowledge in the network. And I think that last one is really quite significant in how we've set up our network structure and programs to really understand from municipalities what's happening on the ground, what's happening in their communities and experiences, while also bringing some of the technical information in that we have access to in the region. So we like to be transparent about our funding. To date, the Flood Resilience Network has been funded by a series of Hudson River Estuary Program local stewardship planning grants, along with support from the New York State Water Resources Institute at Cornell University. And that funding goes to cover staff time, meeting materials, along with the development of the strategic roadmap. So who can join the Flood Resilience Network? Again, we really center our municipal members in the network, and members are representatives from town, village, city, and county governments in the Hudson River Estuary Watershed. So when we're talking about the Hudson Valley, we mean the federal dam at Troy all the way down to Yonkers and the communities that are within that Hudson River Estuary Watershed. Members can include elected officials, appointed officials, volunteers, or staff from these municipalities. And the benefits that members get by participating in the network is access to this peer network, educational opportunities, including technical training, and access to the network of agency, community, and consulting partners and resources as well. So when we went through our strategic roadmap, we realized that there are so many people out there who are working on flooding, who are not municipalities, but may be able to support municipalities in this important work. So we created another rung of participation in the Flood Resilience Network for partners. So partners are staff that contribute pro bono time, expertise, capacity, and resources to advance the network members' flood resilience goals. And so partners include staff from federal, state, or regional agencies, regional organizations, which we're defining as having a program area of more than one county, and private sector consulting firms. And so members' needs are centered in the network, and we think about partners as providing a lot of the resources, technical experience, tools that members may need to partner with or gain access to move some of that work forward. So how can you join the Flood Resilience Network? We have online forms that we ask our members and partners to complete annually. And we ask each individual who participates in the network to fill out their form. I'll put the link into the chat, hvfloodresiliencenetwork.org/join. You can have access to those forms along with a list of who our current members and partners are. Our member agreement includes contact information. We ask folks for their flood resilience work to date and some of their goals, what support and resources are needed, and their interest and availability for FRN programs. So that helps us plan programs for them. The partner inventory includes contact information, what expertise and resources you may be able to provide, and then also their interest and availability for FRN programs. Okay, so our leadership structure, and I'll go through this quickly. So in our strategic roadmap process, we heard that we really needed to have a shared leadership model. We needed different roles to best support the network. And the network is really led by the advisory committee, which includes 4 members and 3 partners. They advise on priority topics for programming. They really direct the network, identify needs and gaps for resources, and keep the network grounded in local priorities. So we're really honored to have leadership from all of these fantastic folks who are working so hard. Julie Noble from City of Kingston, Nate Mitchell and Sylvia Welch from Village of Piermont, Michael Hoffman, City of Hudson, along with Liz LaJudas, Betsy Blair, and Alex Wolf as our partners. So the advisory committee guides the network. They really lead the network. And the operations committee does the day-to-day operations and administration. So we implement a lot of the work that the advisory committee has prioritized. We plan the programs, we work on communications, we secure funding for the network, and the operations committee again includes myself, Jessica Kuonen from New York Sea Grant, and Bennett Brooks from the Consensus Building Institute. And it was really important to us in having the right roles and the right accountability for the operations committee to do a lot of the maintenance that our municipal volunteers in particular may not have the time and capacity for. But again, we really want to center their work and their leadership. The strategic roadmap also lays out a working group structure, so additional leadership opportunities by leading working groups. These are intended to be time-bound, project-focused groups that include both members and partners. This is an image from the roadmap of our plans to incorporate different types of groups to build out the network, plan programming, plan resources. And I also wanted to highlight the leadership of our site visit hosts. So again, Jess will be talking more about the site visits, but we have municipalities that lead programs in their communities, share projects, share case studies, and we want to give a shout out to the leadership of those folks as well for helping with those programs. So I'm going to hand it over to Jess to talk more about Flood Resilience Network programming.
All right. Thanks so much, Emily. Hi, everyone. I'm Jess Kuonen, an Estuary Resilience Specialist with New York Sea Grant, as Emily mentioned. And I'm going to talk about FRN programming. So I've been with the network for about 3 years in this role. And our programming really centers around, as we've been saying, networking between our members and partners, sharing information, and peer learning. And we do this in 3 ways: through virtual meetings, in-person meetings, and both indirect and direct support for technical assistance. So our virtual meetings, we've typically referred to them as lunch and learns. And a format is that we invite a guest speaker on a particular topic of interest to our members. We'll have time for Q&A and discussion, and then also community updates towards the end of the call so that members and partners can share, challenges or successes that they've been experiencing, and maybe they want to discuss with the other people on the call. So this particular screenshot is from a lunch and learn we had in September of 2021, the Culverts Management Program at the Estuary Program. And culverts, I'll just shout out, are part of Pledge Action 7, assessing your culverts and dams. And they're really important. They play a really important role in flood resilience for accommodating these larger volumes of water that we're seeing with climate change. And they also have many co-benefits with habitat and water quality. So the great thing about this lunch and learn was that one of our members reached out afterwards and was able to follow up with the program coordinator that presented on this program and get access to some resources that they mentioned that helped them in their conversations with state DOT, Department of Transportation, and some county officials around some stormwater management issues. So that's just an example of the connections that are made through our programming. Some other examples of lunch and learns that we've had in recent years cover flood forecasts, green gentrification, inclusive community engagement, and some specific webinars on different funding sources. And in 2024, we're hoping to present kind of a regular schedule of these programs, as well as having some evening options, because we've heard some feedback that members aren't always able to attend these during the day. So probably our favorite offering in FRN is our in-person meetings. And so again, a great opportunity to network with peers in person. We usually have some presentations, but it's not very presentation heavy. It's really more focused on having small and large group discussions. And then we have a tour, a guided site tour, where we highlight flood mitigation projects. So this image is from our meeting in Hudson last summer. And at this event, I can think of one example. There was a community member that was applying for the Climate Adaptive Design Phase 2. And there was a community member there from a different community that had just completed it. And they were able to connect. And the one that was applying learned so much from the other community member that had just completed the program. So it's kind of this mentor-mentee relationship that happens at our FRN events. Another thing that Emily mentioned is at these events, we build in opportunities for feedback that directs our programming, in the future. And then if you join and you want to showcase a project, we're always looking for people to host these in-person meetings. And I want to plug that we actually have 2 meetings next week. We're very excited about one in Albany on Tuesday and one in Yonkers on Thursday. So if you are interested in joining, there is still time to register, and we'll put that information in the chat and send it out afterwards. So now I'm going to talk about kind of the technical assistance that can occur with FRN as kind of a node where we can help make these connections. What I have pictured here is a flood preparedness guide. This originally came out of some of those original sea level rise task forces from our founding members. And now many communities around the estuary have completed them for climate smart communities points and just as great tools for communication with community members. And that's something, emergency communications with residents is very important for flood resilience. So this is currently a partnership between the Estuary Program and Cornell Cooperative Extension that provides this technical assistance to communities. But this is just an example of opportunities to connect with others to get climate smart communities points in things like climate change education and engagement. And then finally, I want to touch on vulnerability assessments. So vulnerability assessments are a way to understand the hazards that your community faces, to identify community vulnerabilities, and then to consider future conditions alongside those vulnerabilities and hazards. And it's a foundational planning document for flood resilience. And many of our FRN members have come to the network, arrived there after completing a vulnerability assessment. And we know that there's people out there that have never completed one. And so, we feel this is something we can really help with, connecting communities to partners that can assist with these assessments, or if you've already completed one, understanding where to go next. So I have listed here our founding members completed the Sea Level Rise Task Force reports. And then we have several other communities that completed another type of vulnerability assessment, the community resilience building. I should say that the community resilience building was led by Hudson River Watershed Alliance and the Nature Conservancy, and the Sea Level Rise Task Force was funded by the Estuary Program and led by Scenic Hudson, CBI, and others. So lots of partners involved, lots of ways to connect and share information so that you can start implementing some of these flood resilience actions that come out of these assessments. And then a future goal of FRN, something we're working towards, is being able to offer this directly through FRN for new communities that are looking to complete vulnerability assessments using kind of a cohort model. So you would complete it alongside other communities. It's not something you have to do alone. So now I'm just going to take a step back. I've mentioned culverts, flood preparedness guides, vulnerability assessments, but I would like to take just a broader view of the way that climate smart communities connects with flood resilience and adaptation. So how can climate smart communities help address flood hazards? There's many ways. Just to reiterate, we're seeing more frequent and intense precipitation events. If you're along the waterfront of the Hudson River estuary, you're going to see more days of high tide flooding as time goes on. And this causes a lot of damage to infrastructure, public infrastructure, private infrastructure, and it's really costly to adapt. So many of the climate smart communities actions support flood resilience, particularly Pledge Action 6, 7, and 9. And the Climate Smart Communities program also offers grants, competitive grants that can help you support your flood resilience initiatives. And that's kind of the key here, is it's another source of funding. We want people to keep that in mind as well. So I'm about to show you a crosswalk. A crosswalk is just a way to kind of identify overlap between different programs. So this crosswalk was developed by some Cornell researchers. This was some New York Sea Grant funded research, and they developed this to compare those overlaps between climate smart communities and other water related actions in federal state programs. So I'm not sure of the status of everyone on the call, but it kind of works in several ways. If you're a community that is brand new or on the earlier side of climate smart communities, you're trying to get certified, perhaps this could help you focus your efforts on these water related initiatives. Or if you're a community that's already certified, you've done a lot on the energy side of things, but now you're ready to start taking a closer look at water related initiatives. This can kind of help you understand maybe some of these other programs you can participate in that will also get you climate smart communities points. So it compares climate smart communities with the stormwater MS4 program. That's Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, and that's administered by the DEC and the EPA. The Community Rating System, which is administered by the National Flood Insurance Program, helps you get reductions on your flood insurance. The state local waterfront revitalization program, which is administered by the New York State Department of State, and then the hazard mitigation plans, which are administered by New York State Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Services with FEMA. So lots of programs out there that have these co-benefits with water and flood resilience. And I just want to note that, it's worth probably a whole nother webinar talking about the nuances of these programs. They all have different requirements for program maintenance, the local capacity that's required by the municipality, et cetera. So here's the crosswalk. It's very small, but essentially on the left column, we've got our Climate Smart Communities pledge elements 1 through 12. And across the top row, we have program elements that are eligible for points in the state and federal water-related initiatives. The boxes show where there's overlapping actions. And so we can see that kind of where you can focus your efforts are in pledge elements 6, 7, and 9. So let's dig into that a little deeper. So this is an expanded view of pledge element 6. You can see every program has a little bit of overlap, or I should say NFIP, Stormwater MS4 program, and we have a lot of overlap with the local waterfront revitalization program. So pledge element 6 has to do with climate smart land use. Land use is one of the strongest tools in your toolbox for flood hazard reduction, flood mitigation, and some examples of overlap that are called out specifically in the pink and yellow include a comprehensive plan with sustainability elements, smart growth principles in land use policies and regs, having a local forestry or tree planting program, and preserving open areas through zoning or regulation. If we look at pledge element 7, which is enhancing community resilience to climate change, you can see there's even more overlap. Again, a lot with LWRP, NFIP, and now we see more overlap with our local hazard mitigation plan program. And so some of these that are colored in pink and red include things like evaluating policies, climate adaptation plans, conserving natural areas, watershed-based flood mitigation, green infrastructure, which is what we're focusing on our site tours next week in Albany and Yonkers, source water protection, things like that. And then finally, pledge element 9, inform and inspire the public. There's overlap with every single one of these programs because communication with the public is extremely important for climate adaptation, for flood resilience, all of that. And so the key takeaway here is that the more points you can get in this and other programs translate to more access to funding because adaptation is costly. So another takeaway might be that navigating all these programs can be overwhelming. And so that's where FRN can help. Again, we're a network of peers. We're doing the same work. I shouldn't say we, municipalities and counties are doing the same work. Through FRN, you gain access to resources, programs, and technical assistance. We can help direct you to our partners at the Estuary Program and other organizations that have programs and funding structures set up to help you accomplish these tasks. And then again, you can help direct future funding, or not funding, you can help direct the future of FRN as a member or a partner. And this image, kind of FRN, we're trying to be the middle of this, the spokes of the wheel here to help with this complicated picture of climate adaptation. All right, so just to reiterate how you can get involved with FRN, you can join as a member or partner. Our website is hvfloodresiliencenetwork.org. And if you go to the join page, you can access those member and partner forms. Again, members are representatives from towns, villages, cities, or counties. That includes volunteers. And partners are state, federal, or regional agencies, regional nonprofits greater than one county, and consulting firms. And just fill out those forms to help us understand where you're at and what you can offer and how you want to engage in FRN, whether it be maybe being on the advisory committee, hosting a site tour, or just showing up at the beginning. And if you want to kind of see what we're all about, we have these programs next week. Would be a great opportunity to come and just experience what our site visits are like. We can send out details about that after this webinar. But if you join, you'll get the information as well using those member forms. And just a reminder that these upcoming meetings are going to include a mix of presentations, discussion, networking, and a guided tour of flood mitigation projects. And I just heard that in Albany, the fire department has lent us their trolley. So we're going to get to ride on a trolley and ride around and look at green infrastructure projects. It's going to be really fun. And we always feed you too. Our agendas for these meetings include emergency management, flood mitigation funding, and these tours. And that's because that's what our advisory committee and our members, gave us feedback that that's what they wanted to hear about. So I'll end it there. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share.
Great. Thank you so much, Jess, and thanks to you all for joining us this morning. We're going to take some questions. So if you have any questions, make sure you open up the Q&A box and put them in there. And I did see a question come in through the chat, but please use the Q&A box. It's a little easier for us to find those questions, but we'll start with this one. So the question is, how can I find examples and case studies of applications of natural and nature-based flood control systems in the Hudson Valley?
That's a great question. There's a few places. So one thing that comes to mind, it kind of depends on what type of flood control you're looking for. If it's along the Hudson River Estuary shoreline, the Hudson River Estuarine Research Reserve has a sustainable shorelines research project. It's been going on for over a decade, and they have a wealth of information on sustainable shorelines on their website. We can send that out after the call. And then when it comes to other case studies, I would say that there's not a great, I don't know of a great kind of catalog you can go to access those. I've collected some. I have a website I can send out for you, but that is actually a goal of FRN, is to really collect these case studies, do the storytelling, and take a little of that pressure off the beginning of people just trying to understand, how do I start with this and what have other people done? Do you have anything to add to that, Emily?
Yeah, there's some nice resources through the Lower Hudson Coalition of Conservation Districts on green infrastructure, in particular, if that's of interest. There previously was a compilation of green infrastructure projects around the Hudson Valley from the Hudson River Estuary Program, but I believe that site has been taken down. So if anyone from the Estuary Program knows where that went and wants to correct me, please send it to me. I know that existed in the past. So I think because natural and nature-based features are so broad that there's no one repository, but if there are, as Jess mentioned, more specifics about what you're looking for, that you may be able to find some more compilations of different examples. Okay, great. And then we've got a comment here that the New York State DEC Flood Resilience Handbook has case studies and guidance on this as well. So I'm going to just drop that into the chat so everyone has access to that. Thank you, Liz. Are there any other questions about the Flood Resilience Network, Climate Smart Communities, flood resilience tools? Does anyone have questions about joining or roles? I'm not seeing any, but I'll give you all one more minute. Okay. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this morning. Thank you to Lauren Bunce from Hudson Valley Regional Council for helping out with the Zoom, Jessica Kuonen, New York Sea Grant, for presenting on the Flood Resilience Network. My name is Emily Vail, Hudson River Watershed Alliance. We've got 5 questions that just came in. Great. Okay. I just needed to start wrapping up and you all at the same time hit send. That was remarkable. Okay. This is great. Okay. Are there any fees or requirements to join the Flood Resilience Network? There's no fees. It's completely free for both members and partners. With partners, there's an expectation that you may provide pro bono, you may come to these meetings. That doesn't mean that you need to provide, engineering support for free or anything like that, but just in showing up to the meetings. For municipalities, it's really important for us to keep it as low barrier as possible, but we do have expectations for both members and partners that you do complete that form, that you make a good faith effort to come to our programs and participate and provide feedback to help direct the network. We don't want people to just sign up and never come. We don't want people to just sign up and never tell us, what they're hoping to get out of the network. We're really hoping that it's a commitment of that sort of time and energy. Anything to add on that, Jess?
No.
Okay, great. Would like to hear more about the advisory committee. What topics do they cover and what do members do? You want to take that one?
Good question. So I would say most recently, the advisory committee has been advising on these upcoming site visits. So helping build our agenda, and also kind of understanding where we want to go next year in terms of our work plan, maybe some work groups that we're going to establish next year. Emily, I'll hand it over to you if you have any.
Yeah, and I think, this year has been a year of transition from past structures into our new advisory committee structure. So a lot of what we've been working with them on is how to really get the groundwork laid to implement all of the future programs in the way that we're hoping to build. So we only have the one advisory committee, and then we're planning to have additional working groups, and those will be dependent. We've got some ideas from our strategic roadmap, but we'll reassess the priority of those based on member feedback. And there may be opportunities to get involved in a working group aside from the advisory committee as well. And we're hoping that those working groups provide additional networking opportunities, that we can create some resources that are shared amongst the whole network in those working group spaces. We've got a question. Wow, so many great questions that came in. Okay, good. Are there ways that individuals can become involved? I would say not at this time, because we're really launching this new roadmap, we're launching this new network. We wanted to be mindful of what our capacity was to be inclusive of all different entities. So at this time, municipalities are really centered. So it's a representative from the municipality, the member. The partners have an affiliation of some kind, whether it's agency, nonprofit, or a consulting firm. So we don't have ways that unaffiliated individuals can become involved at this time, but I suspect that many individuals do have some kind of affiliation, and that there are a lot of municipal volunteers out there. And just, to reiterate what Jess said, is that, you're invited to join FRN as a member as well. Okay. Can you go a little deeper into how you coordinate, participate, impact, implement local, county, and state hazard mitigation plans?
Yeah, so sorry if this was confusing, but we actually don't do any of that. However, if this sounds like a great topic that we could cover in the future. Currently, we haven't had a strong connection to the hazard mitigation planning process with FRN, but we're trying to establish that connection to kind of demystify it a little bit more for our members. So I could see this as a future lunch and learn topic, or also just making those connections and making sure that Dishes and FEMA are partners in FRN. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and I think it's important to distinguish between like what FRN itself does and what the municipal members of the Flood Resilience Network have done, because many of them have participated in the hazard mitigation plans, and we would bring those with that expertise in to talk about that, so we could all learn together and think about what role that the network can play. So I think that that's one of the strengths of the network, is that we bring municipalities with different expertise in to share their experiences and provide a learning opportunity for others as well. Okay. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your flood data findings from the different municipalities in the Hudson Valley? Is there a place to review them online? So I'll just say that the Flood Resilience Network hasn't done flood data work, but there are a lot of tools to understand flood risk in the Hudson Valley, and just maybe you could talk a little bit about those.
Sure, if you want to understand flood risk, generally, if you're along the coast or the shoreline, there's sea level rise viewers. There are, climate projections for increased precipitation. But if you want to know more about individual municipalities. One thing you could do, some research, is to get on that Climate Smart Communities website and look at vulnerability assessments that people have done, because that's really where each community, understands their hazards and their vulnerabilities. And it's different for everyone. Every community is situated a little differently, like where are the residents, where's the critical infrastructure. So it's not easy to make a kind of a one size fits all statement about flood risk, and which is also why, this network is so important, because otherwise everyone's just doing it individually.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of those local vulnerability assessments come in too, where the individual towns may have, or towns, villages, cities, or counties may have more detailed information as well with some of their work. Okay, so this question: one of our 2 villages is embarking on the Climate Smart Communities process, and our town's bronze is aging. And I love this phrase. And for those of you who are less familiar with the Climate Smart Communities certification program, you need to continue to renew your certification. So once you achieve the bronze level certification, there's a continuation of that process to maintain that bronze level certification. So that's why the bronze is aging. Okay. Are there examples of villages and towns coming together on some of the flood and resilience efforts where we might even bring in our other village? So I'll start with this and say that yes, there are definitely examples of villages and towns coming together, and the community resilience building workshops that Jess mentioned, the Hudson River Watershed Alliance and Nature Conservancy did cohorts of municipalities that were together to do those vulnerability assessments. So Lori, we did the one with Town and Village of Red Hook, Town and Village of Rhinebeck together. So if you haven't submitted that for vulnerability assessment, the community resilience building report, you can. Many other municipalities have gotten points from that, even though it includes multiple communities. There are also, watershed-based flood studies like Resilient New York that multiple municipalities can submit points on. We saw in Columbia County recently, there was a watershed management plan where 2 towns both submitted for Climate Smart Communities points and got them. So there are certainly examples of opportunities for municipalities to be working together on the Climate Smart Communities points. In terms of where FRN can come in, that's really what Jess mentioned. We're hoping to build more of those cohorts of programs so that we're bringing in a planning process or some kind of expertise and sharing that with multiple communities so they can get those points together. Okay. So this question, very interested in equitable flood planning in the Hudson Valley. We are too. Do you have advice on where to look for case studies where socially vulnerable communities have been successfully included in stakeholder planning? Yes, great question, Kate. So I'll start with this again, and then I'll pass it over to Jess. So the Flood Resilience Network is also very interested in thinking about equitable flood planning, what inclusive community engagement looks like. And so we are going to be hopefully working on piloting some, learning from communities what's working and what some of the needs are, so that as municipalities are going through these processes, that our community members, particularly people vulnerable to flooding, but disadvantaged communities broadly, are included in those processes. So we just a couple weeks ago, the Hudson River Watershed Alliance had our annual watershed conference on diversity, equity, inclusion, and environmental justice. And we had a fantastic presentation from Candida from Groundwork Hudson Valley on the Yonkers Climate Action Plan. I think that's really a success story in how they were able to think really inclusively about their community members, the experience and expertise that they brought, the ways that they paid people and compensated them for their time, the language support that they received. So I would say that Groundwork Hudson Valley would be really a great resource to go to and see how they put together that climate action plan, which is now approved by the city of Yonkers.
Yeah, I would agree with that example. And I know I'll just add too that the Climate Adaptive Design Studio program through the Estuary program has really committed to inclusive engagement, and they might have some insights on case studies that they've done on work in Poughkeepsie and maybe other locations as well. But yeah, I agree. It's a great question. It's something we're all interested in and really excited to focus on and document and do more storytelling about in the future.
Great. Okay, so there's a question here about what paid positions on municipal staffs might be brought into the flood resilience network and this work. Highway superintendents are on this person's mind, and I'll say, yep, highway superintendents definitely welcome to participate. We've had participation from municipal engineers, sustainability coordinator staff, planners, any other staff position, economic development, I think, has been included.
Yeah, highway superintendents, DPW play a very important role. Code enforcement officers, you know, they're all welcome. All municipal staff is welcome, and that's really important for having those diverse voices in the rooms, in those more practical roles as well. The data that are kind of doing this work day to day.
Okay, here's a question. Are the vulnerability assessments shared with officials and organizations from other regions around New York State? New York City, there's FloodNet sensor data and DEP for New York City's drinking water supply, the Finger Lakes with DEC floodplain management.
So vulnerability assessments, I think, are usually public documents posted online. I'm not sure I understand the connection with FloodNet in New York City. And, you know, yeah, DEC floodplain management. I'm not sure of if I don't think they're reviewing vulnerability assessments necessarily on the municipal level. They have plenty going on. But yeah, maybe, sorry, I guess I'm not totally sure how to answer that.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, the Flood Resilience Network is not active in New York City. We stop at Orangetown and Piermont on the west bank of the Hudson, and Yonkers on the east bank of the Hudson River. And so we know that New York City is doing a ton of flood work, and I think there may be opportunities to bring some folks into the Flood Resilience Network and hear some of those case studies. But we also know that the order of magnitude is a little bit different for New York City compared to other folks. We have had some participation from folks involved with the DEP and New York City's drinking water program, particularly Ashokan Streams program. We've been connected with them on some of their flood work in Ulster County within the Hudson Valley, but you know, sponsored by New York City. So we're certainly in touch with those folks and getting some of their insight and experience in. And then in terms of other regions, I think we're hoping to share this information out as a case study, and a network very similar to the Flood Resilience Network has been started in the Long Island Sound region. So the Coastal Flood Resilience Network is a group that was inspired by the Hudson Valley Flood Resilience Network and started their own for the Westchester and Long Island portions of the Long Island Sound watershed. So we're always trying to connect with other state agencies, state folks, and then also bring in information and expertise from other regions as well. And I think our lunch and learns are particularly an opportunity. Okay, great. So here's another question. There's concern that the FEMA flood maps may be out of date in the Kingston area related to possible flooding from the lower Esopus, especially due to possibly holding the Ashokan Reservoir at a near full state. This may be done to offset reduced supply from the Delaware Aqueduct when it is shut down for repair. How might the network help in addressing such an issue? I can start. Okay, great. So I think one of the challenges that we're hearing from communities, all over the Hudson Valley is understanding flood risk and understanding flood projections. So how do we know when and where it might be flooding. And FEMA floodplain maps are out of date. You know, that we know that they're out of date for a lot of places. And there's also lots of places that are prone to flooding that are not mapped FEMA floodplains. And so there's a couple of different pieces of that. I think one of the things that the network is really trying to understand is what data are out there, what sensors, what monitoring, what projections. We heard at a lunch and learn a couple of weeks ago about a tool from the Stevens Institute around coastal flooding projections. But we know that there's just not enough monitoring of water flow to really be as useful for local decision makers as we need. You know, we need more USGS stream gauges. We need a better gauging system so that we can really have more real-time information for decision makers to communicate out about flood risk. So that's something that we're starting to look into. I think that it's also important to document the places that flood, when and where they are flooding, because, you know, when it comes from FEMA, the state, the resolution is pretty coarse, but people on the ground can see where flooding is happening and they can document it. And the MyCoast tool is really powerful in being able to do that. So if you're seeing flooding in areas that are not mapped floodplains, even if they are mapped floodplains, you can take photographs of that and submit it through the New York MyCoast system, not only for coastal flooding. If there's, you know, stormwater flooding, an undersized culvert, if it's, you know, floodplains, again, whether they're mapped or unmapped through the FEMA system, that can be really, really valuable in showing to some of these officials that there's a need for better mapped data. And that's also a tool that, you know, Jess through New York Sea Grant and others have been involved with, and that through the Flood Resilience Network, we've been sharing that out as well, that opportunity.
Yeah, and I'll just say that as for how the network can help with this issue, we're currently figuring out kind of this sounds like an advocacy issue, and we're figuring out our advocacy approach. And so more to come on that, but you know, you can join our events and connect with other people that may be experiencing similar issues.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll be looking for feedback from our members for what approach we take. Great. Well, we are at 9:30. Thank you to everyone who submitted your wonderful questions. I just had to threaten to wrap up the program, and then you all asked your questions. They were really, really wonderful, and I'm glad we could have that additional time for conversation here this morning. So thank you again so much for joining us. We'll be posting this on our YouTube channel, so if you'd like to share with anyone, please do. If you want to come to our site visits next week in Yonkers or Albany, please join the Flood Resilience Network and you'll get that information. And I'll be sending out some of the links that were shared in the chat as well after this webinar. Okay, thanks so much. Have a great day.